Read, in her, a woman's body, O great lady, there exist all the places of pilgrimage. Chapter 14. Purasharanalasa Tantra. A man who looks upon woman as a human being, O thou of the best countenance, can have no perfection though he may repeat mantras. He meets with the contrary result. Chapter 2. Uttara Tantra. A man who drinks with devotion a little of the water into which a woman has dipped her toe or eats the leavings of the food in her plate, is sure to have uninterrupted success. Nigamakalpadruma. Women are the gods. They are sacred and they are the ornaments of society. One should never hate, condemn or beat them. Chapter 5. Mandamula Tantra 25. There are in each Tantra 2 strata, the high and the low. But of what avail were all these? Eventually there came a time for the Tantric sadhakas when they gave up the ideal of realizing the knowledge of God and applied their minds to the attainment of miraculous powers. It was during this period that various kinds of unnatural sadhanas and the worship of ghosts, ghouls, etc., entered into the body of the Tantra and converted it into its present form. This is why two broad strata, the good and the bad, the high and the low, are met within each Tantra. Sadhanas of the lowest stratum are seen inserted into the worship of the highest. And every one now selects from the Tantras that kind of sadhana which suits his own nature. 26. The new process of worship founded by the Vaishnava community of Bengal. There appeared another change in the Tantric sadhana on the advent of Sri Chaitanya. Thinking that the spread of dualism among the masses would be beneficial, he and the Vaishnava teachers after him propagated among them the Tantric mantras and outward worship only, leaving out, to a great extent, the Tantric practices leading to the attitude of non-duality. They also introduced a novel method into the above worship. They taught that the deity, the object of worship, should be served by one as one wished oneself to be served. The Tantric deities purify by mere sight the fruits, roots and other food offered to them by the worshippers. The general belief is that these offered articles, taken by the aspirants, increase their spiritual inclination instead of their animal propensities of lust, anger, etc. according to the process newly started by the Vaishnava teachers. On the other hand, the belief gained currency that the deities took subtle parts of those offerings, and sometimes they took even gross parts in accordance with the ardor or importunate eagerness of the devotee. Many other changes were also introduced by the Vaishnava teachers into the process of their worship. Chief amongst them seems to be that they established, as far as possible, the preeminence of the Tantric mode of worship, called Paswachara 1, and favored external cleanliness. They preached to the people in general that by remaining absolutely clean in thought, word and deed, and knowing that the name itself was Brahman, Jivas would attain the beatific vision. Through the constant repetition of the name of the Divine Lord according to the precept, success is achieved through japa and japa alone. 27. From this sadhana originated eventually the doctrines of Kartathaja, etc., the essence of all those doctrines, but their effort was all in vain. Very shortly after they had passed away, the human mind, full of desires, introduced impure ideas into the pure process of worship founded by them. Man discarded the subtle ideas, and took only the gross objects. Instead of cultivating the heartfelt attraction which a woman has for her paramour, and directing it towards God, he went the length of taking a mistress himself. Thus he introduced bhoga, worldly enjoyment, into the pure process of yoga, union with God, and brought it down to the level of his natural inclination to a certain extent. And what else can he do? For he is unable to live such a pure life. It is only a combination of yoga and bhoga that he can assimilate. He wants to realize spirituality. but simultaneously covets a little of the enjoyments of sight, taste, etc. And this was why there arose, in the Vaishnava community, worship and secret sadhana according to the doctrines of the Kartadhajas, Alls, Bals, Darvasis, Sains, and so on. Therefore, at the root of all these is seen the current of the very ancient Vedic karmas, that combination of yoga and bhoga, along with it a tendency to combine each action with the non-dual knowledge, a process founded by the Tantric Kula teachers is also seen. 28. The method of the teaching of sadhya, the object of realization, and sadhana, the means of realization according to the Kartadhaja and other doctrines. The reader will easily understand what we said above, if we mention here the ideas of the Kartadhaja and similar other communities regarding God, liberation, self-control, renunciation, love, etc. Speaking of these communities, the Master told us many things at different times. They are recorded in verses in a simple language. The reader will realize, when he hears them, how far those verses help the ordinary people in understanding the ideas conveyed by those terms. The people of these communities call God Alaklata. It is superfluous to say that the word alak is derived from the Sanskrit word alakshaya, the unknown and unknowable. This alak enters into the mind of pure man. In other words, it manifests itself through it as Karta, the spiritual teacher. On such a teacher they bestow the title of Sahaj, the man whose natural tendencies led Godward. The community is called Kartadhaja, worshipper of the spiritual teacher, because it is only a human being, truly inspired by the mood of the spiritual teacher, that is regarded by them as the object of worship. About the real nature of Alaklata, and its influence on a pure heart, they say, it comes imperceptibly and goes imperceptibly. Nobody can see the alak. One, who has known it, is the object of worship in the three worlds. The sign of a Sahaj man is that he always remains intact. In other words, he does not lose his serenity on account of lust, even if he be always in the company of women. They say about him, he lives with women but never indulges in sexual satisfaction. If an aspirant does not live unattached in the world of lust and gold, he cannot advance spiritually. They, therefore, teach him, be a cook, and distribute the curry but do not touch the cooking pot. Make the frog dance in the mouth of the snake, but let not the snake swallow it. Bathe in the sea of ambrosia but do not let your hair be wet. Just as in the Tantra the sadhakas have been divided into three classes, the animal, the heroic and the divine, so there are high and low classes of sadhakas amongst the Kartadhajas. They speak of four classes, the Alls, Bals, Darvasis and Sains, and they say that there is none higher than a Sain. The Master said, all of them worship the formless aspect of God. He used also to sing often a few songs of this community for us. Take, for example, the song, Dive, O my mind, dive into the sea of beauty. You will realize the treasure, the gem of love, when you will make a search in the deepest world of your heart. Search, search over and over again, and you will realize Vrindavan in your heart. The lamp of knowledge will constantly burn, brightly illumining your heart. Who is he who conducts the boat so easily on land? Kuvir says, listen attentively, meditate on the holy feet of the Guru. Thus to worship the Guru and remain engaged in congregational devotional exercises are their chief sadhanas. Although they do not disapprove the worship of the image, forms, etc., of deities, they generally do not worship them. The worship of the Guru in India is very ancient. It seems to have been prevalent from the age of the Upanishads. 4. We read in the Upanishads, let the Acharya be your God. 1. It appears that the worship of deities was not at all in vogue at that time. One is astonished to see how many forms that worship of the Guru assumed in India, in course of time. Besides, the aspirants have to undergo various religious exercises in order to renounce from their minds the consciousness of difference such as clean and unclean, good and bad, and so on. The Master said, the aspirants receive instructions regarding those exercises coming down from Guru to disciple. He would now and again mention a little of those also. 29 Vaishnavacharan took the Master to a private meeting of the Kachhibagan group to test him. The Master was ever and again heard to say, the Vedas and the Puranas should be heard by the ear, but the disciplines prescribed by the Tantras should be actually performed and carried into practice. It is seen too almost everywhere in India that the followers of the Smritis practice one or other of the Tantric disciplines. Big scholars of the Nyaya and the Vedanta are, it is observed, Tantric in practice. Learned scholars of the Vaishnava communities, well versed in devotional scriptures like the Bhagavata, are also seen to follow the secret sadhanas of the communities like the Kartathajas. Pandit Vaishnavacharan was one of them. He was intimately connected with their secret congregation at Kachhibagan, a few miles north of Calcutta. Many men and women of the said community lived there and were engaged in sadhana under his instruction. Vaishnavacharan took the Master there on a few occasions. Noticing that the Master was always perfectly unaffected by lust and seeing that on account of the love of God, he entered into ecstasy, which they had never seen before. A few women of that place tried, we were told, to test him in order to know whether he had completely conquered his passions. As a result, they paid him the respect due to one who was intact and naturally disposed towards God. The ingenuous Master, of course, had gone on a trip there with Vaishnavacharan at his request without suspecting anything. He did not know at all that they would test him that way. Be that as it may, he never went there again. Afterwards 30 Vaishnavacharan knew the Master to be an incarnation of God. When Vaishnavacharan saw the wonderful strength of the Master's character, his purity and ecstasy, his devotion to and reverence for him increased so much, day by day, that he never hesitated at last to admit, in the presence of all, that the Master was an incarnation of God. 31. The miraculous power of Pandit Gauri, the follower of the Tantras. Scarcely had Vaishnavacharan paid a few visits to the Master in a short time, when Pandit Gauri of Inds came to Dakshineshwar. He was an eminent Tantric sadhaka. As soon as he reached the Dakshineshwar temple, an amusing event happened in connection with him. We heard of it from the Master. He said that Gauri had a miraculous power acquired through his austerities. Whenever he was invited to a scriptural controversy, he used to utter loudly a few times the line, "Whom else shall I, helpless one, have for a refuge, but thee, O mother of the pot-bellied Ganesh," preceded by the syllables ha, re, evoking heroic sentiment. Before entering the house and the place of the meeting, the Master said, the hearts of all were startled with an indescribable fright when they heard from his mouth those syllables, expressive of the heroic mood, and that quarter of a stanza from the hymn to the Devi by the Acharya Sankara uttered in a voice deep and sonorous like the rumbling of a cloud. 2 results were achieved by this. Firstly, by virtue of that sound, the power in Gauri became fully awakened, and, secondly, he stole away the strength of the adversaries by startling and charming them with it, loudly uttering that sound and slapping his left arm, like wrestlers, with the palm of his right. Gauri entered the meeting and sat down with his legs folded and his knees joined together in front and the feet behind, in the fashion of the courtiers of the emperors of Delhi, and engaged himself in the controversy. The Master said that it was then impossible for anyone to defeat Gauri. The Master had not known of that power of Gauri, But, as soon as he entered the Dakshineshwar Kali temple and uttered loudly the syllables ha, re, someone, as it were, within the master, pushed him up and made him utter those words more loudly than Gauri. Hearing those syllables from the mouth of the master, Gauri uttered them still more loudly. Excited at that, the master uttered ha, re, far more loudly than he. The master used to say smilingly that a terrible noise arose, like the din made during inroads by dacoits, on account of the louder and yet louder utterances of those syllables on both sides. With sticks, cudgels, etc., the gatekeepers of the Kali temple ran from wherever they were, hurriedly, towards the place of the noise. All others were beside themselves with fear. That apart, Gauri could not at last utter those words more loudly than the master and was silenced and, as if in a somewhat dejected mood, slowly entered the Kali temple. On knowing that the master and the newly arrived pandit were raising all that din, all went away roaring with laughter. The master said, "The Divine Mother afterwards told me that the power with which Gauri stole away the powers of others, himself remaining unconquerable, was exposed here and lost to him forever. Mother attracted that power here, into the master, for his good, and it was seen that, day by day, Gauri was actually charmed by the ideal of the master and became completely obedient to him. 32. Gauri worshipped his wife as the Devi. Pandit Gauri was, we have already said, a Tantric sadhaka. At the time of the worship of Durga every year, Gauri, we were told by the master, made all the preparations for the worship of the Mother of the Universe, adorned his wife with dress and ornaments, seated her on a wooden seat decorated with alampana and, for 3 days, devoutly worshipped her as the Divine Mother herself. The Tantra teaches that all the female figures are the forms of the Mother of the Universe and that there is a great manifestation in them of the Divine Mother's power of maintaining and gladdening the jivas man. Therefore, should worship in a pure manner all female figures without exception, forgetting that the Divine Mother herself stands veiled in female figures, and looking upon female bodies with a feeling of lust, as if they were objects of enjoyment only. One insults the Mother of the Universe herself and consequently meets with endless ruin. In the Chandi 11.6, the gods recite the hymn to the Devi, Vidya samastastava Devi Beta, Straya samasta sakala jagatsu, Twayake apuritam ambayatad, Kate studastavaya paraparakti. O Devi, thou art of the nature of pure consciousness. Again thou art manifested as all the various sciences, high and low, from which endless kinds of conceptual knowledge arise. Thou existest as all the female figures of the world. Thou alone pervadest the whole universe and art present everywhere in it. Thou art incomparable and beyond words. Who has ever been or will be able to describe thy numberless noble qualities by reciting a hymn to thee? Many of us read this hymn daily in India, but, alas, how few of us try to look upon the female figure as the Devi herself, pay it the due respect even for a few moments and thus feel pure joy in our hearts and feel blessed? How few are those who do not look with a vile mind and an impure eye upon female figures, the vehicles of the Divine Mother's special manifestation, and do not insult the Mother of the Universe, hundreds of times every day. Oh, India, you are in this present miserable condition only because you insult female forms with your bestial attitude and have forgotten to serve Jiva as Siva. The Mother of the Universe alone knows when she will have compassion on you and remove that bestial mood of yours. 33. Gauri's strange process of offering oblations. We have heard from the Master himself of another wonderful power of Pandit Gauri. The eminent Tantric sadhakas perform homa at the end of the daily worship of the Universal Mother. Gauri also performed it on many occasions, if not daily, but the process of his homa was very strange. He did not perform it like others who make an altar on the ground by means of lumps of earth or sand, arrange pieces of wood on it, and then kindle fire and offer oblations. He stretched his own left arm in the air and placed on it one mond, about 82 pounds, of wood at a time, lighted it and offered oblations into it with his right hand. It is not a little time that homa takes. So, it appears to us to be quite impossible for one to sustain the heavy weight of one mond of wood on the arm stretched in the air and keep the mind calm and devoutly offer oblations in the prescribed way for so long a time, bearing the heat of the fire on the arm all the while. That is why many of us could not at first believe in the feat, even when we heard of it from the Master himself. The Master understood it and said, "Ah, I saw him do it with my own eyes." That was also one of his miraculous powers. 34. A meeting including Vaishnavacharan and Gauri was convened at Dakshineshwar. The Master in Bhavasamadhi rode on the shoulders of Vaishnavacharan, who composed a hymn in praise of him. Mathur Babu invited a few scholarly aspirants like Vaishnavacharan and convened a meeting a few days after Gauri had come to Dakshineshwar. The purpose of the meeting was a discussion between the newly arrived Pandit Gauri and other scholars on scriptural evidence in order to ascertain, as before, the spiritual condition of the Master. It was convened in the morning in the music hall in front the temple of the Mother Kali. Seeing that Vaishnavacharan was late in coming from Calcutta, the Master started for the place of the meeting with Gauri. Before entering the meeting, he went into the temple of the Divine Mother Kali, saluted her with devotion and worshipped her feet. As soon as he came out of the temple staggering in Bhavasamadhi, he saw Vaishnavacharan fall at his feet and salute him. No sooner had the Master, inspired by spiritual emotion and love of God, seen him than he went into samadhi and sat on Vaishnavacharan's shoulders. The latter felt blessed and was beside himself with joy. He composed extempore and recited a hymn to the Master in Sanskrit. Seeing that gracious and bright form of the Master in samadhi, and hearing that graceful recital of the hymn by Vaishnavacharan with his heart overflowing with joy, Mathur and the others present were standing motionless on all sides with their eyes steadfast and hearts filled with devotion. The Master's samadhi came to an end shortly afterwards, when all went along slowly with him and sat down in the place of the meeting. Now began the proceedings of the meeting. But Gauri, first of all, said suddenly, as he, the Master, has bestowed so much grace on the Pandit, I will not enter into a discussion with him today. Even if I did, I am sure to be defeated, for he is armed with divine grace today. Moreover, I find he is a person holding the same opinion as I do. His conviction about the Master is the same as mine. A discussion is, therefore, useless in this case. The meeting came to an end after a little scriptural conversation on other topics. It was not a fact that Gauri was afraid of the scholarship of Vaishnavacharan and so refrained from a controversy with him, seeing the way of life of the Master and his characteristics. He, with the help of his keen insight produced by his tapas, felt in his heart of hearts, even in that short period of his stay there, that the Master was not an ordinary man but a great soul. For, some time afterwards, the Master said to him with a view to testing his mind, "Look here, Vaishnavacharan calls this, himself, an incarnation of God. Can that be so? Please tell me what you think." 35. The conviction of Gauri about the Master. Gauri replied seriously, "Does Vaishnavacharan call you an incarnation? I should consider his estimate very low. My conviction is that you are he, from whose parts incarnations come down to the world from age to do good to humanity and with whose power they accomplish that work of theirs." The Master said with a smile, "Ah, you go even beyond him. Will you tell me what you see in me?" Gauri said, I say so on the evidence of the scriptures and from my own experience. If anyone takes up the opposite view and controverts me, I am ready to prove my conviction. The master said like a boy, "You say so many things. Who knows what it is?" "I don't know anything at all," Gauri replied. "Quite right. The scriptures also say, 'Thou dost not know thyself.' So, please say how others can know you. If you have compassion on anybody and let him know the truth, then he can know it." 36 Detachment came on Gauri in the company of the master. He renounced the world and went away to practice tapas. The master smiled on hearing the words of faith of the Pandit. Gauri's attraction for the master grew with days. In the master's divine company, the Pandit's knowledge of the scriptures and the result of his sadhana were drawing towards completion and were manifested as intense detachment from the world. He was daily losing his relish for scholarship, honor, miraculous powers, etc., and his mind was withdrawing itself to the lotus feet of God. Gauri had now no more that pride of scholarship, that love for argumentation, that arrogance. All vanished altogether. He now understood that he had spent his precious time so long in vain without making the utmost efforts to realize the lotus feet of the Divine Lord. Time should no more be wasted that way. He formed the firm resolve in his mind that he should renounce his all and depending entirely on God with a heart full of devotion, should spend the few days of his life in eagerly calling on him, so that he might have his grace and vision. Gauri thus spent day after day and month after month in the blessed company of the Master and in the meditation of God. As he was for a long time away from home, the members of the Pandit's family, his wife, son and others, wrote letters to him again and again, for they had some inkling from people that he mixed with a certain holy madman at Dakshineshwar and that his mind was becoming indifferent to the world. The thought that they might come to Dakshineshwar and drag him into the worldly life again, gradually grew strong in the mind of the Pandit. This was evident from the trend of the letters he received from them after a great deal of anxious thought. Gauri discovered a way out. Knowing that an auspicious moment had arrived, he bowed down at the holy feet of the Master and asked leave of him with tears in his eyes. The Master said, "What is that, Gauri? Why do you want to leave suddenly? Where will you go?" Gauri replied with folded hands, "Bless me, so that I may have my desire fulfilled. I'll not return before I realize God." Since then the world has never heard of Pandit Gauri. In spite of a great deal of search 37 while giving instruction, the Master would quote Vaishnavacharan and Gauri. Faith in the Leela of God as a human being. The Master mentioned to us, many a time, various incidents from the lives of Vaishnavacharan and Gauri. Again, sometimes in the course of discussing some topic, he would tell us what opinion they had expressed on it. One day while he was giving instruction to a devout aspirant, the Master, we remember, said to him, "When one actually sees his chosen ideal in man, one realizes the Divine Lord." Vaishnavacharan used to say, "When one has faith in the Leela of God as man, one acquires perfect knowledge." 38 Gauri on the knowledge of non-difference between Kali and Krishna. Noticing in one of the devotees the pernicious idea of discrimination between Kali and Krishna, the Master once said to him, "What is this mean idea? Know that it is your chosen ideal that has become Kali, Krishna, Gar and all others. But, do I ask you, on that account, to give up your own chosen ideal and worship Gar? No, not that, but give up the attitude of hatred. Hold on firmly to the belief that your chosen ideal has become Krishna, Gar and so on. Don't you see that a daughter-in-law of a household goes to her father-in-law's house, serves and pays respect to everyone, father-in-law, mother-in-law, the husband's sisters, his younger and elder brothers and others. according to her relationship with them. But she shares her bed and thoughts with her husband alone. She knows that it is through the husband that all others of the household are her own. So it is with your chosen ideal. And know further that it is on account of your relation with the chosen ideal alone that you are related with the other forms of his. And you should have devotion to and reverence for them. Know this and drive away hatred. Gauri used to say, when Kali and Gauranga are known as the same, I shall know that true knowledge has come. 39 Vaishnavacharan on regarding the object of one's love as a form of the Divine Lord. Again, observing that the mind of some devotee could not become calm on account of a great attachment to someone in the family, the master advised him to serve and love that object of his love as a form of the Divine Lord. We told the reader before how he advised a woman devotee who was very much attached to a young nephew of hers, to serve and love that child as the boy Krishna, and how, as the result of that practice, she attained bhavasamadhi in a short time. While he was teaching that one should have reverence for and devotion to the object of one's love, as God, the master sometimes quoted Vaishnavacharan on that subject and said, Vaishnavacharan used to say that if anyone could look upon the object of his love as his chosen ideal, his mind would soon turn to the Divine Lord. Saying so, he would forthwith explain it. He used to advise the women of his own community to do so. It was therefore not blameworthy, for, have they not got the mental attitude of a paramour? They wanted to attribute to themselves that attraction for God which a woman feels in her mind for her paramour. The master, however, said that it was not a thing to be taught to the general public, for, he said, it would increase adultery, but he did not disapprove of one's loving and serving one's husband, son or some other relation as a form of God. He, it is known to us, taught many of the devotees who took refuge at his lotus feet to do so. 40 This instruction accords with the scriptures. The conversation in the Upanishad between Yajnavalkya and Maitreyi. On a little thought, it becomes clear that this is not a novel on scriptural doctrine. The Rishi, the author of the Upanishad, one teaches in the conversation between Yajnavalkya and Maitreyi, the husband becomes dear to the wife only because the Divine Lord is in the husband. The mind of the husband is attracted towards the wife only because he is in the wife. The Rishis of India, the authors of the Upanishads, have been thus teaching us, for ages, to look upon all those things and persons of the world, the Brahman, the Kshatriya, wealth, etc., that give rise in us to the idea of there being something precious, and attract our minds towards them, as part of the Divine Lord, who is of the nature of love and bliss, and to love them accordingly. When Narada, the divine rishi and author of the aphorisms on devotion, and other teachers of devotion teach jivas to turn the deadly enemies of man, the passions of lust, anger, etc., towards God and ask them to have recourse to the devotional attitude of a friend, a mother, or a sweetheart towards the Lord, they but follow in the footsteps of the more ancient rishis, the authors of the Upanishads. The master's opinion, therefore, on this matter is clearly scriptural. 41. The incarnations of God always abide by the authority of the sastras. The teaching of the master about paying respects to all religions. It is needless to explain in so many words that the great souls who are the incarnations of God bring to the religious world the gospel of a new path, quite in keeping with the authority of the ancient scriptures and in no way contrary to their doctrines. This can be understood by studying the life of any one of the incarnations of God. It has all along been our endeavor in this book to explain to the reader this fact in the life of Sri Ramakrishna, the prophet of the modern age. We meet, at every turn, with the same reverential attitude towards the scriptures. But, if we fail to do so, let the reader know that it is due to the defects of our narrow intellect, and not to any shortcoming of the Master, whose discovery of the new great spiritual truth as many faiths, so many paths has charmed the world, not only the Vedantic non-dualism etc., but all those doctrines which we call the vile Kartathaja etc., and at which we turn up our nose in imitation of the clever worldly West, who use one standard to judge the actions of other individuals and nations and, cleverly setting it aside, adopt another to examine their own methods and actions. All were accorded by the Master, the God-man, a respectable position as genuine paths to the realization of the Divine Lord and prescribed for persons according to their particular inclinations and capabilities. Urged by hatred, many of us asked the Master on many occasions, "Sir, how is it that such a high-class aspirant as the Brahmani used to practice sadhana with the 5 M's 1? Or we used to put the question, is it not wrong that a devotee of such a high caliber as the learned Vaishnavacharan did not refrain from taking a paramour as auxiliary to his sadhana?" The Master replied over and over again, "Oh, no, they did not incur any blame by it. They believed wholeheartedly that it was a path to the realization of God. One should not condemn any method practiced by a person who genuinely believes in his heart of hearts that it will enable him to realize God. The spiritual attitude of no one should be interfered with. For, if one rightly grasps any attitude, through it alone one can realize the Divine Lord, who is the embodiment of all attitudes. Stick to your own attitude and continue calling on Him, but never condemn anybody's attitude nor try to make another's attitude your own." Saying so, the ever blissful Master would begin forthwith to sing now and again, "Remain, O mind, in yourself. Do not go to anyone else's place. If you make a search in your heart, you will get without any effort whatever you want. That philosopher's stone, the supreme treasure, can give whatever you ask for. How many are the gems lying scattered at the back door of that supreme being? Do not, O mind, become restless to take painful journeys to places of pilgrimage. Why don't you joyfully bathe and cool yourself in the confluence of the 3 streams? 1 at the basic center. 2. What do you behold, O Kamala Canto? 3. All is unreal magic in the world. You do not recognize the magician who dwells in this body. Footnote 1.3. 1.33. 1. That is, the 4 months of Ashur, Sravan, Bhadra and Aswin. 1. Due to incapacity of the priests and sacrifices. Tr1. Paswachara equals Pasu plus Achara. Pasu ordinarily means an animal, but in the Tantra it means jiva, hence Paswachara is not anything censurable. It simply means the rites and ceremonies of those who still consider themselves as jivas and have not attained oneness with Siva, who is Pasupati, the Lord of Jivas. As long as a man regards himself a jiva, he must keep an eye to cleanliness, purity of food, etc. Hence in Paswachara, stress is laid on these things. Tr1. Taittiriya Upanishad, I11. 2. LLI 3I1. Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, 2. 5. 1. The 5 essentials of certain tantric rites, viz., fish, flesh, wine, fried rice etc. All these are denoted in Sanskrit by words beginning with M, so they are called M's. Tr1 3 streams, Ida, Pingala and Sushumna 2 basic center, Muladhara Chakra 3 the composer of the song, Tr.